Hey there, folks. It's Ben from KNOWLED and Mac Group US. Greetings from Los Angeles, California. We're here in Hollywood. We're at Terraform LA, where we run our House of Light project with Godox's KNOWLED LED line. And I'm joined here by a really interesting guy. His name's Hrvoje. Hrvoje travels the world teaching filmmakers about cameras and lighting. And I need Hrvoje here today because we have a really exciting new technology called PaletteLab. It's the new color engine coming out from KNOWLED LED. Welcome, Hrvoje.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to get into the weeds of why this is so special.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to have you here, I wanted to think about questions that a lighting engine technology like this would bring up to serious cinematographers.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really happy to have you here so we can ask these kind of practical questions. So today, I kind of just want to jump into some of this lighting tech and how it's going to be applicable to our clients. But firstly, let's just ask the question, why are we still talking about better LEDs? LEDs have become really, really good in the last decade. Why are companies still investing so heavily in new color sciences?
Yeah, well, when I was a gaffer and even now as a DP, this conversation of convenience or quality would always come up. And so what I mean by that is, are we going to prioritize colors and the final image, or are we prioritizing ease of use and speed on set when we're choosing our lights? And with that, if we know that we need to be fast or we need to be power efficient, we would generally always steer towards LED lights. But on the flip side, if we knew that skin tones was what's most important or color reproduction was way more important, then we would usually go with tungsten and HMI fixtures, just because we knew that they would give us more true to life colors.
Gotcha. So what problems still exist that many cinematographers don't even realize they're dealing with?
Mm-hmm. I'd say the biggest issue with LEDs has always just been the spectrum that it actually reproduces, right? So your camera can only see the spectrum that your lighting fixture actually feeds it. This is why you often hear people say that daylight looks the best and daylight is most natural, because the sun has the fullest spectrum out of any light out there. And so this is one thing that we really try to solve now with PaletteLab, is to give it that full spectrum and have full spectral distribution. Because no matter how nice your camera is, you could shoot on a red or an RE, if you have a light that has really bad spectral distribution, it just won't look good at the end of the day. And so you can think of it kind of like tires on a car, right? Like if you have a really nice and powerful sports car that has incredible handling, it can go really fast, but then you put bad tires on it, the car will just slide all over the place and you'll never actually be able to utilize its full performance. Yeah. So you can think of that with lighting, it's kind of similar to that, yeah.
Sure. Well, I know that's important. That's why we put such a colorful sort of chipset of colors here, some things to fluoresce and everything. What limitations do you think we're still noticing with modern LEDs?
Right, I'd say the way an LED light renders colors has always been the biggest limitation. So making sure that the costumes that our actors wear are the same color as they are in real life, as they are in camera, making sure that the set design and props stay the same colors, and then on commercials, making sure that the brand colors are actually representative. And of course, one of the biggest one of them is skin tones. So due to the lack of spectrum in traditional LED lights, a lot of gaffers and DPs will still revert to using HMI and tungsten lights because they just know that they will get more true to life skin tones. And at the end of the day, having healthy and accurate looking skin tones is all that matters in the final image.
Yep, skin tones are always important. It's interesting to see people reaching back towards that legacy equipment. It's hot, it's heavy, maybe not as power efficient.
Right.
So your color's really important, especially with skin tones.
For sure.
So when you first saw PaletteLab, what immediately caught your attention about it?
Several things, but I'd say when I first got in my unit, I pulled out my Sekonic, I have a C800 color meter, and I went to see what this color engine is actually capable of. And I think, metering it with a color meter is kind of the best way to go about that. And I was immediately blown away by the spectrum that this light has, just because of how full and also linear the spectrum of PaletteLab is. It was just unlike any other LED spectrum that I've seen out there.
Well, C800 is definitely the industry standard spectrometer. It's a really reliable tool trusted by top professionals, so that's a good way to do it. PaletteLab engine, what does that really mean?
So we call it a full spectrum engine. And so what full spectrum actually means is that the light can virtually reproduce any color out there. But it does this while actually keeping the spectrum of the light, because when first RGB film lights were coming out, you would often hear this term full spectrum be thrown around pretty loosely. Just because the light could technically do all these different colors on the color wheel, but in reality those colors weren't the most accurate, because you would lose all the other spectrum of your light the second you set that lamp into like a specific color mode. And this is why you'd like even see people sometimes putting gels over the RGB lights, and you would think like, why would you have to do that if you have an RGB light? But they would do that in order to keep the spectrum of the light while still getting the color they need. And so this is something that PaletteLab really solves, because thanks to like all the different color emitters, it doesn't have to narrow down to this one specific color. It allows you to get the color you want while still retaining more of that spectrum, and thus recreating all those colors more accurately.
Cool. So why should a filmmaker care about spectral continuity?
Well, as we discussed, like with a light that has spectral continuity, shining a deep color onto your subject, it won't fundamentally change the color of the subject, right? You see this issue with traditional RGB lights, where the color of an object can appear a lot more dull after switching your light to a certain color, and it's again because of this lack of spectrum. So with a light engine like PaletteLab that has spectral continuity, the colors just end up being more representative to how they are in real life because of all that extra spectrum.
Cool, that makes a lot of sense. So let's pull up an infographic here. Walk us through what we're actually looking at here.
Absolutely, yeah. We've been talking a lot about spectrum this whole time, and this is what the spectrum actually looks like. And so as you can see, we have a very full spectrum that covers a lot of area, and it's very consistent and linear thanks to the multispectral coupling technology that's found inside PaletteLab.
Multispectral coupling technology.
That's right.
That sounds great. What are these missing gaps in between these sort of like peaks and these valleys that we see in conventional LED spectrum?
So these gaps are usually created due to the lack of LED emitters found inside of the actual light engine. This was especially the case with some of the earlier LED fixtures that were only red, green, blue for RGB, or you had red, green, blue, and amber for RGBA. You can kind of see how the spectrum is like a wave that goes in and out, and each one of those spikes actually represents one of the LED emitters. And so this is something that improved quite a lot once like RGBWW became more prevalent, because RGBWW has red, green, blue, but then it also has 2 white chips. So it would expand that spectrum even more. But PaletteLab just takes that to another level with the multispectral coupling technology, which, to explain that, it basically uses multiple color emitters of the same color at different wavelengths in order to enhance the spectral continuity. So for example, we have multiple different shades of blue, multiple different shades of red, and all these different shades are creating these colors that end up making up the color engine.
Oh, cool. So how do these problematic gaps eventually show up in an image?
The gaps show up in such a way that your subject don't really look true to life anymore. I think that's kind of like the best way to put it. Skin tones just start kind of looking dull and waxy. Your whites don't pop as much anymore, and your whites may even appear more gray than actually white. And the same thing goes with like warmer colors. The warmer colors, they will lose their richness and saturation. And then of course, if you're doing a lot of product shoots, you'll find that it's near impossible to match your lights to the colors of the brand you're shooting for. And that's kind of the issue that always happens if you're using a light that has a lot of these spectral gaps.
So let's talk about skin or skin tones. Everybody says their lights have great skin tones. What actually creates beautiful skin, and why is skin one of the hardest things for LEDs to reproduce?
Right, so when you have a lot of energy on the right side of the spectrum, this is what will usually create these beautiful skin tones. Since most skin tones live on the warmer side of the spectrum, this is kind of why tungsten lights have always been really popular for key lights, because they have a lot of this energy on the right side, or in the side of the spectrum where you have all the reds and oranges. And that's what creates these natural looking skin tones. And so that's something that LED lights have historically struggled with for the longest time, since most LED chips actually start out as a blue chip, which is then coated to get the desired color. And so this is why you'll often see a really big spike in the blue area of an LED spectrum. And it's also why they're often lacking in these red and orange sides of the spectrum. However, now that we have PaletteLab, we were able to recreate the spectrum of tungsten by adding something that's called a deep red chip. So that deep red chip lives on that right side of the spectrum, and it completely boosts the spectrum on this side. And so that usually just results in more natural and accurate looking skin tones. And also, if you see how linear the PaletteLab spectrum is, we can see that the graph looks very similar to that of a traditional tungsten lamp. So it's kind of finally a viable replacement for your tungsten lamps.
That's great. Sounds like that deep blue emitter is going to really improve kind of the fidelity of our skin tones.
For sure.
So do you think this is something that audiences are going to consciously notice when they're watching the footage?
It's a great question. I don't think anyone in the audience is going to like sit there and point at the screen and be like, they used LED for this or they used tungsten for this shot. However, it is something that an audience will subconsciously feel, I think. Yeah. Most of us, we see human faces on a daily basis and we know what a face should look like. So when you use a light that doesn't reproduce skin tones correctly, it can be something that could throw off your audience a little bit and kind of take them out of the story that they're watching, because they're not seeing something that they're used to seeing. It looks different from what they're used to.
Yeah. That makes sense. When things are off with skin tones, you're definitely going to sort of break the continuity of the film.
For sure.
It's distracting to our audiences, and that's when they sort of exit the story.
That's right.
A lot of people, when they're looking at the sort of playing field of new lighting technologies, they're really interested in this color rendering index factor. Why isn't this enough?
Well, CRI just isn't enough because it doesn't tell the whole story. That's the simplest way to put it. CRI bases its score on a palette of only 15 colors. So as long as a light reproduces those 15 colors accurately, it will have a high CRI score. And as we know, we use way more than just 15 colors in all of our work. So you can have two lights with the same high CRI score, both set to 5600 Kelvin, and they'll give you completely different results. The other issue with CRI is also that it's based on a human observer and not a digital camera. So if you're buying a light to install inside your living room, then yeah, you should probably pay attention to what the CRI score is. But if you're buying a light that you want to film with and you want it to actually look good on camera, there's a lot of other metrics that are way more important that you should look into than just CRI.
Okay, interesting. So, we're kind of thinking of just those 15 different color references. So maybe there's a little bit of margin for differences and not the same qualities.
Exactly.
So, should cinematographers be paying attention to SSI or TM30?
I'd say both SSI and TM30 give us way more relevant data to how our light will actually perform, and most importantly, how it will render colors than CRI does. The difference is SSI will compare the light's spectrum to any desired light source that you want to test it against. It's kind of the ultimate comparison tool when you really think about it, because it doesn't follow any pre-made standards or any pre-made palettes. It just gives you raw data on how one light source stacks up against another. And the most common light sources that we usually compare it to is daylight and tungsten. And this is why you even see a lot of manufacturers like Godox that will give you a daylight and a tungsten SSI score, which is basically the percentage of how much of a how much of a spectrum the light reproduces in daylight and in tungsten mode. Meanwhile, when it comes to TM30, it's kind of similar like CRI, but much more advanced, because TM30 uses 99 different color samples to compare it to light to, which is a lot more than just 15. And so it compares these 99 color samples in both color fidelity, which ends up being your RF score, but then also in gamut to show if the light is undersaturated or oversaturated compared to those 99 color samples. And this ends up being your RG score.
Okay, wow. So we're going from 15 to 99 different kind of reference chip points. So
that's right.
A lot more resolution in that metric and that rating.
For sure.
PaletteLab offers 3 different light curves. I think this is fascinating. When do you choose one over another?
So we have 3 different light curve modes. Each mode will basically adjust the curve of how white light is reproduced. And so, starting off, we have our proprietary Godox curve. We made this curve to be optimized with CMOS cameras, which is what most cameras these days use. We created it to, our eyes perceive light very differently from a camera sensor. And so this is why this mode is really good because it'll give you richer skin tones and just colors that are more accurate and more optimized for today's cameras. Next up, we have the black body curve. So this curve follows the Planckian locus that represents a specific path colors usually follow when heating up a theoretical black body object. And so this curve is usually best used if you're matching a PaletteLab fixture to like other LED lights, such as RGBWW ones, or even some more legacy fixtures. And then lastly, we have daylight. So daylight curve follows the CIE daylight standard. And so it's therefore best used when you're trying to match sunlight for your shoot.
Okay, great. So honestly, it's a lot of specs. Let's forget about the specs for a minute. Hrvoje, you're lighting a commercial tomorrow. How would you use this new technology?
Well, this light will really shine on a commercial set, pun not intended. One of the biggest problems I've had in the past with commercial content has just been matching those rain colors to the colors of the light fixture. So I'd say if you're shooting anything product related, you'll have a much easier time getting the exact shade of yellow or the exact shade of red or whatever other color the brand you're filming for is actually using in their logo and their branding.
Okay, cool. One question I think a lot of people are probably asking is, does this mean that maybe the RGBWW technologies that we've seen out there already are becoming obsolete? What if products like our new MG4KR or other full-colored fixtures in the KNOWLED lineup that are incredibly capable? Where does PaletteLab fit?
Well, I see it as PaletteLab is really just expanding the KNOWLED ecosystem, right? Okay. Both RGBWW and PaletteLab have their place on set because at the end of the day, these are just different tools designed for different jobs. And so, with PaletteLab, it focuses more on quality and continuity of white light and also natural color reproduction, while RGBWW prioritizes high output while still giving you those wide color capabilities. And so it's really not so much about this light is better than the other, but it's more so about just choosing the right tool for your job.
Okay, great. And I want that really saturated moonlight look, but I also need to cover this really wide area. Would I still reach for something like an MG4KR with its 3,250 watt high output?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The MG4KR will provide you with a much higher output due to using less emitters for each one of the colors. And so that allows them to be more powerful. And as you said, if you're in like a wide field or a forest or something at night and you want something like a cyan moonlight, which I personally love doing, you absolutely need a punchy fixture to be able to cover such a wide area and light such a big location.
Okay, so having fewer color options might give me more output in that usage case.
Right.
Okay, so let's switch it up. Let's say I'm shooting a feature film or a commercial or a beauty campaign where the goal is to match daylight, practicals, fabrics, and make skin look as natural as possible. Is that where PaletteLab really shines?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where the new color engine will really show its strengths.
Yeah, I think I got it. What type of control options are built into the KNOWLED PaletteLab? When I take a look at this version, I see DMX in and out, USB, LAN for probably SACN. What else am I dealing with?
So all of our lights have Bluetooth built into them, so you can just control them off your phone using the Godox app. But our KNOWLED lights, they all have DMX as well as CRMX built in. So CRMX is kind of like wireless DMX. And so you can control them from something like a gaffer's control or any of your favorite iPad apps, like our very own KNOWLED app, which is actually free. And we offer that to control lights via CRMX.
That's great. You see a lot of people walking around on set in the place of a console. They're dealing with an iPad now. It's cool we have that feature built in.
For sure.
We spent a lot of time talking about the light engine itself, but as someone who's worked in rentals and is on set, I know crews also care about the fit, finish, and design of the fixture. Let's talk about that for a little bit. One of the first things I notice is there's no external ballast or power supply. Why is that so significant?
Yeah, so the PL series has an all-in-one design. We wanted to build the ballast into the fixture itself for a multitude of different reasons. For one, you're able to set this up much faster as you've got one less cable to worry about, which in turn also means less failure points. You don't have to worry about where you're going to rig the ballast to, like if you're designing some kind of crazy lighting rig. And it's also less things to transport and less things to worry about misplacing, which I know for you as a rental house owner, that's also something that will be much appreciated. It really just makes the whole light a lot more nimble and easier to use. And so I think that's the biggest benefit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right here on the stage at Terraform, we're standing underneath an 8 by 8 foot AM 1600R light bank. Big, beautiful source. But in the past, if I needed to light a stage like this, probably would have built a grid of speed rail and had lots of different lights, rigged at different points. Sure. Adding those power supplies is a whole other rigging point I have to add.
Yep, definitely.
So, do you think that this ease of rigging makes a big difference?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think if you're like using it on like a boom arm, for example, or something like that, you can use a smaller boom arm, or you can just boom it out way further ahead because of it's so small. And as we mentioned, if you're designing some kind of lighting rig, you don't have to worry about additional rigging points for your ballast when you're designing those rigs.
Cool. It's going to save precious time on set too.
Definitely.
These fixtures are IP65 rated. From your perspective, how important is that today?
IP pertains to how water and dust resistant a fixture is, and I would say this has become like the #1 requirement for anyone shooting on location. There's so many times we're shooting exteriors, or we have our lights outside lighting up the interior of a location, like through the windows, and then the unexpected happens. And rain starts pouring down, and all of a sudden our whole shoot is about to get ruined.
Out come the baguettes.
Out comes the baguettes. And so this is where IP65 rated lights are so important, because we can just keep rolling and we don't have to worry about running outside to cover them with the baguettes or do anything like that. We can just let the rain wash over them and keep shooting. And likewise, if we're shooting in like a really dusty location, like let's say an old warehouse, you don't have to worry about the dust getting inside of the internals of the lamp head and ruining your fixture.
Yeah. People love a wet down in an old warehouse. It's a popular music video. Like you see it all the time.
For sure.
Here in Southern California, we love to film near our beaches where we have salt spray in the air. We love to go to our sandy, hot deserts where the fans are working overtime, pulling particulate through the fixture. So having that sealing seems like a really positive thing. The Godox LED fixture offers a lot of really great features. You can also get the same color engine from a more value-priced Godox LED line as opposed to the KNOWLED LED line. What you don't get is this IP65 rating or some of the control options we talked about, in particular that CRMX control. But you can still have this high-quality light engine at your fingertips for that value price. When you look at the PaletteLab line in its output class, how does it compare to other fixtures out there?
I say these lights are really compact and lightweight for their class, and this makes them perfect for traveling crews. You don't need any massive cases to pack these in, which also makes them a lot easier to carry if you're flying somewhere with your gear. So I'd say that's definitely one of the benefits.
Cool. Well, I want to talk about something a little bit different. Obviously, this is a great technology, but there's something else that smart gaffers and lighting professionals care about, and that's product support and after-sale support. If you're taking your hard-earned money and you're investing in these tools, you need to know that there's a team out there that can keep these running for you. And we're actively opening up multiple repair service partners here in the US and obviously across the world, but we really have them in every region here in the US. Also, Mac Group, the company I work for, we have reps standing behind this product, regional business managers, in all the different major regions here. So if you're smart, you invest in product lines where people stand behind them and help you out. If you have technical questions, you can call us. We have a dedicated tech rep team standing behind this product line so that we can troubleshoot you on set and everything like that. So really, we're talking a lot here. To understand this lighting technology, you have to see it with your own eyes, or you need to come to a camera test with us. If you're here in SoCal, the great thing is you can come here to Terraform. We do by appointment demos here with anybody who's interested in learning more about the full breadth of this lighting technology. For our East Coast friends, we have a similar showroom in White Plains, New York, where we'd love to show you our equipment there. Feel free to make an appointment and come see us there. But also, any of our authorized resellers, if you have a store that you like to shop in, you're going to be seeing this technology coming to their showroom soon, or maybe your favorite rental house will be onboarding this. So certainly feel free to ask them about PaletteLab. That's a great place to go engage with our product as well. This has been an awesome product release. I know Hrvoje, we can't wait to see what our visual storytellers do with this brand new lighting technology.
Absolutely.
That's what we're in it for. And I so appreciate you coming here, lending your expertise, and helping me understand a little bit more about what's exciting about this new product.
Yeah, thank you for having me out here. I mean, this was exciting, and yeah, I'm glad I could explain a little more why this is such a special thing that we released out here.
It's been great having you, and safe trip back to Europe.
Awesome, thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.